Hello, my name is Jim. Welcome to my booktube channel about books, reading and stuff. In this video I'd like to tell you about the top 3 books I read in the month of January and also let you know about my February TBR, the books I want to read in February. Of the 8 books on my TBR at the beginning of January, I finished 5 of them. Number 3 is Served Cold. This is an anthology of short stories, 22 short stories by Horrortube authors. There's a wonderful foreword by our own Steve Donoghue. The stories that stood out for me were Frostbite by Alfie Talbot and Water of Life by Gloria McNeely, but there wasn't a dud amongst them. It was a very entertaining read if you're interested in horror, particularly in a cold, freezing setting like the Himalayas or Antarctica or even the moon. I'd recommend this collection of horror stories. Number 2 will be The Vanishing Half by Brit, Bennett. For me this was a 5-star read. It was a very gripping story. It's the tale of 2 sisters, Desiree and Stella. They are from Mallard, which is a town of light-skinned African Americans in Louisiana, a town that's not on the maps. And at the age of 16 in the 1950s they run away from home for the big city of New Orleans, and there Stella and Desiree after a few months part company and Stella just vanishes. Desiree ends up marrying a very dark-skinned man and has a dark-skinned daughter, Jude, who's described as blue-black. She's very dark. And Stella, it turns out, moves to Los Angeles and starts passing herself off as white. This began in New Orleans when she started work as a secretary. She didn't tell anybody of her African American roots, and then she passes herself off as white. Her husband Blake doesn't know of her family. She makes up lies, and it's a fascinating tale about the lies we tell and how the more lies we tell, we can't go back on the past, we can't go back to our roots. And it's not just Stella who's passing, one of the other characters, Reese, who's Jude's boyfriend, in a way, is also passing in his own way. It's historical fiction. It goes from the 1950s, of the Jim Crow times, to the 1980s. The story starts in a way when the 2 girls witness the lynching of their father in Louisiana, and yeah, it's a thoroughly gripping read. I would recommend this. I gave it 5 stars. 2 honourable mentions from the books I finished would be Unzipped by Suzi Quatro. This was her memoir. I did a video about celebrity memoirs here, about Suzi Quatro's memoir and Bryan Cranston's memoir. I wasn't too impressed with Suzi Quatro's memoir. She has an incredible ego. She talks herself about her Napoleon complex. I used to love listening to Suzi Quatro when I was much younger, and she was a trailblazer for women in rock, and she had a direct influence on singers like Joan Jett and Chrissie Hynde, the Pretenders, but she thinks a lot of herself. The other honourable mention would be Ex Vivo by Vincent Lenihan. This is a biomedical thriller. The idea is that you can lose time from your life. Wouldn't we all like to knock off a few years? But there's a catch. The process is very expensive. It will cost over $1 million, and for that you can have 3 months taken off your life. You can go back 3 months, but you also need a donor, and it's an ineffective process. The donor will lose 10 years of their life, giving you an extra 3 months for yours. And it's a police procedural. The story starts when an old woman is found floating dead in a lake, but the records show that she isn't actually an old woman, but she's a 20-year-old university student. And the detective Valerie Nash, is a great detective, but she has her foibles, like many of these detectives had. She has a weakness for whiskey and cigarettes and for unsuitable men. It was an interesting read, an engaging read. All the books I read this month I enjoyed, but this didn't make it to my top 3. There are 2 books I didn't finish this month. Little Dorrit. This DNF on the cover is very tempting. I'm tempted sometimes to put it down, but now I'm 60% of the way through. Maybe I'll finish it in February. It will go over to my February TBR. At the moment, Little Dorrit, Amy Dorrit, is in Venice, but she's not too impressed with the city, and keeps thinking that round the corner she'll run back into Marshalsea prison, the prison for debtors, which is such an overbearing shadow on the whole story. I started Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I'm 40% of the way through. It's quite a tome. I can see why Brandon Sanderson has so many followers. He writes a very good story, a very engaging story, and you like his characters, or I like his characters, his central protagonists, Vin and Kelsia in Mistborn, and I can see this being a contender for my top 3 for February. On to my February TBR. In addition to Mistborn and Little Dorrit, I have The Last Mona Lisa, which I didn't even start in January. I like books about paintings and about painters, and this is about the stealing of the Mona Lisa and whether the painting returned is real or whether it's a fake. Also on my TBR I have Lost Worlds and Mythologies. This is a collection of short stories in the fantasy and science fiction realm, and I have this American Fairy Tales by Dato Turashvili. Dato Turashvili is a Georgian author, and this is a recent edition translated into English. This edition came out last year, 2021. I want to read as much Georgian literature in English translation as I can, and hopefully one day I'll be able to read Georgian literature in the original language, but that's not for today. Okay, can we have a drum roll please? Number 1. My best read of January was The Dust Bowl Orphans by Suzette D. Harrison. As you can see on the cover, there's these 2 young girls of African American descent on a dust road looking away from us. These 2 girls are Faith, aged 15, and Hope, aged 5. They were living in Oklahoma in the early 1930s with their family. They were trying to make a living on their land, but the 1930s, as we know, was the era of the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl swept up all the good soil, and there were these black blizzards that clouded out the sun, and a lot of people moved from Oklahoma to California in the Great Migration. If you've read Grapes of Wrath, you know about the white side of this. This story looks at the black Okies who were part of this Great Migration. The father doesn't want to move because it was so difficult getting the land originally, but their mother's nagging him to go, and when their older sister Charity is fatally bitten by a rattlesnake, that's the final straw. The family load up the mule cart to head west. But then a black blizzard descends, and Faith and Hope seek shelter in the basement of a house, and they get trapped there. The two girls are released from what could have been their dusty tomb by these two poor white teenagers, Henry and Micah Owensley, and not being able to find their own family, they go with this white family, this very evangelical white family, to California, where a lot of adventures and troubles on the way. And when they get to California, it's not the promised land, and they can't find their family, but they do find a boarding house, and they struggle to survive. Remember, this is still the Jim Crow era, and even in California is no race-free utopia. The African Americans have to wait until the whites are served in Roosevelt's soup kitchens before they can get their food. The story is a dual narrative. In the present day we have Zoe, who's an art curator, who's curating this photographic exhibition about the Black Okies, and in this exhibition she comes across a photograph where she sees an image of Faith, which was taken when Faith was crossing from Oklahoma to California, and Faith is the spitting image of Zoe, and Zoe feels this might help her to piece together parts of her missing family tree, and she's very tenacious, digging up this historic evidence. It's an enthralling story. I was gripped from beginning to end. It was very few books moved me to tears, but parts of this moved me to tears. And it's not all grim, depressing. There's a lot of uplifting parts as well. It's wonderfully told. The pacing is very good, and the characters are very well drawn. Possibly the parents of Micah and Henry are a bit two-dimensional, but on the whole this is a great book. I thoroughly recommend this. The Dust Bowl Orphans, and its release date is February the 7th, so it's out very soon. I was lucky enough to get an e-arc from Book Sirens. Okay, so that was my top 3 and my February TBR. If you enjoyed this video, you can like and subscribe below, and I'll see you on the next video. Good night.